Welcome to the FEMCAST, where women's voices aren't just heard, they're amplified. This is more than a podcast, it's a movement. A space where we break the silence, spark conversations, and stand together for equality, inclusion, and change. Every episode, we bring stories, ideas, and voices that challenge, inspire, and empower. So if you believe in the power of women's voices to change the world, hit subscribe and join our community across social media at The FEMCAST. Or visit our website, www.thefemcast.com. Together we rise, we roar, we rewrite the narrative. This is The FEMCAST, and I'm your host, Anita White-Morn. Ever met someone who feeds off admiration, but feels nothing for anyone else? Someone who can ruin lives and still play the victim. That's not confidence. That's malignant self-love, the engine that drives narcissists and psychopaths to power. In this episode on the Gaslit Brain series, we uncover how narcissists rise to the top, charming, manipulative, and completely devoid of empathy. From boardrooms to government offices, they build empires of control, leaving mental illness, corruption, and fear in their wake. We talk about how to spot these personalities before they destroy lives, and why empathy isn't soft, it's survival. From teaching emotional intelligence in schools to pushing for legal rights around psychological safety, we're breaking the silence around abuse of power. Because when we understand the psychology of narcissism, we stop normalising it. This is the FEMCAST, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Hi Jane, you're very welcome back to today's episode of the Gaslit Brain, and it's been going swimmingly so far. I'm delighted to have you back, and today we're talking about malignant self-love, which I'm fascinated by.
I think, I've been thinking about the podcast and what we should talk about today and all of our different discussions that we've had over the years now. And, I don't think everybody is excited about gaslighting as you and I are, Anita, but here goes. So when I was I was researching and reading and preparing to write The Gaslit Brain. And it came across psychologist Sam Vaknin's book, Malignant Self-Love. And I listened to some of his videos, and anybody who's dealing with a narcissist in their life, or they're worried about a narcissist at work, I highly recommend listening to him. That's his specialization, and he's very knowledgeable and articulate, and sort of the way he expresses the condition is very, very powerful. So I think, Anita, you and I have talked about it already, because I wanted you to read this, as we both experienced individuals at work that perhaps could be characterized as narcissists. And the thing that most struck me in his definition was he said, you have to understand when you're dealing with one of these individuals that they don't have a child within them. They no longer have that child self or the inner child, or however a psychologist or psychiatrist might evoke that past and that childish self who is kind of always held in our hearts. He said, you have to understand that the narcissist's child is either sort of crying in the corner, like crying and unreachable, or is dead.
Wow. Because, down through the years, we hear about in psychology and psychotherapy, love that inner child, go back, what would you say to that inner child? How would you speak to her or him? What would you say if she was 6? What would you say if she was 9? So if their inner child is dead, what does that mean for them?
Well, hence we get their very destructive personality, essentially. On the one hand, you're hurt. It breaks your heart to hear that. But on the other hand, if you've ever dealt with a narcissist in a personal relationship or at work, you know that they're dangerous and they're destructive. And just as they no longer, you could say that they objectify their own child. There is no inner child to talk to, because everyone in their worldview is an object. And I guess including themselves. And that's where it got really interesting for me with Sam Vaknin's understanding of the condition. Because I understand, and I write about the fact that, I actually look more specifically at psychopaths, and there's all kinds of subtle differences in how their brains are operating, but without having to get into all that. He uses narcissist, I use psychopath. Bottom line is, this individual objectifies you. You are not a human being to them. Just like an animal isn't an animal that can be hurt. They have no problem hurting creatures. I mean, it was really interesting in America. I don't know if you saw this story, but there's a woman who is very high up now in the government. She's being promoted to a very powerful position. And I don't even want to say her name, but the bottom line is she's very powerful. She's in the media all the time. And she told a story about how she had a dog, a puppy, that wasn't behaving properly. And so she took it into a gravel pit on her farm. She pulled out her gun and she shot it. And she thought that was, I know. And what's been fascinating to me is she thought that was a normal story to tell, which to my mind let her mask slip a little bit because there was an enormous reaction about it. Everybody was shocked and appalled and horrified that she would have behaved this way. But she didn't even know that it would get that reaction or she would have kept it hidden. And narcissists are incredibly adept at hiding the fact that they don't see you as a human being. They see you as an object and they'd like to use you as a pawn.
That's unbelievable that she has come through school, primary and secondary and university, and that she wouldn't have any empathy towards an animal. Imagine what she's like. I presume she has children, has had relationships. That is just cold.
Well, you just said the key word. So narcissists, one of their key traits, or in my case, they say psychopaths, one of their key traits is they don't have empathy. You and I talked about that before on the podcast, and I think we should just go over it really fast one more time because it's one of the most important things for people to understand. These individuals, they don't have empathy. They don't have feelings. They don't have a child within them that feels things or that feels sadness or love or joy or happiness or connection. Missing. They don't have it. It is, Sam Vaknin's term is dead. In my term, it's because I'm using the neuroscience, it's empathy erosion. The empathy's gone. So it can be measured in the brain. And the neuroscientists can see that the affective empathy circuit doesn't light up. And when it doesn't light up, you don't feel anything. You don't feel guilt, so you can hurt somebody. You don't feel remorse. You can shoot your dog and tell everybody all about it because you don't have any feelings. So she forgot for a moment that she doesn't have feelings and needs to cover that up because that's horrifying to the rest of humanity who is awash with emotions all the time. We live all day long in an emotional state. And so we think everyone does, but it's the most important thing to understand about a narcissist in a relationship or at work. They don't have any feelings for you. They can pretend. They're very good at pretending, but they don't have any feelings.
Yeah, incredible, isn't it? That they can go through life, be around other people and be so dead inside, and the harm that they cause and the ripple effect it has on people's physical, mental, psychological, on the person as a whole. And that's just one person, the amount of harm they do around them, and it spreads just like a horrible virus.
Exactly. And I mean, the thing is, coupled with this lack of empathy. So, if you can shoot a dog in cold blood, imagine what you can do to humans in the workplace. Imagine what you do to humans in personal relationships. Like you don't have any sense of being cruel. You just are behaving the way that your brain is telling you to behave. So let's add to that. Lack of empathy is a defining feature of the narcissistic personality. Lack of empathy. Now, let's add on the fact that they don't believe that they need to obey the rules. They think that they are above the law. They think they're so intelligent and advanced, and I mean, they're full of what's called self-aggrandizement. They love themselves, and that, but it's not really a real feeling. They admire themselves. So they have this kind of belief that they don't need to obey the law. And, we can just take a look geopolitically right now and use a whole bunch, like if we wanted to teach a class on this, the first thing I would do is say, okay, let's take a look at some of the world leaders and whether like their relationship to the law, their relationship to justice. You could do it wouldn't even take you long to look at how frequently they just ignore the law, break the law, weaponize the law. The law is just a tool for them. It's not something that the regular human being feels that they must obey the law, that's kind of the core of civilization. That's at the root of democracy. We have to obey the law. We might not want to sometimes, but the bottom line is that's kind of what keeps us all on the rails in society. Now, you can quickly identify a narcissist in that they don't play by the rules. They don't obey the laws. They oftentimes will be highly abusive, and yet they'll get caught on financial fraud because just like they have no problem abusing people because they have no empathy, they have no sense of when they take money or they use a charity that's really just a cover up for funneling money into themselves, or they have no sense that the repercussions of that is that it hurts people. If you aren't actually funding a charity and the money is going to help someone with cancer, then you're hurting the people with cancer, but they don't think that way.
I suppose the most famous example is that is Madoff, the pyramid scheme, and the amount of intelligent people who got sucked in by that and went with it and lost their life savings.
Yeah. It happens. I mean, Ponzi schemes are a dime a dozen. It happens all the time. I mean, every single day in Canada, you open up the newspaper to read about financial fraud and scams and so on in the real estate industry, because real estate here is really, it's a stock market. People invest in it. It's not shelter for people to live. It's a crisis in our country. It's like a stock market. And so you see tons of financial fraud. And yeah, really smart people fall for it. It's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I think there's an opportunity for us to get educated and understand that, we teach people about physically dangerous people, and rightly so, right? Right from childhood, you will be taught to be careful about cars and how you navigate traffic, how you navigate water, like you need to know how to swim. But how, ever in your life, Anita, were you ever taught to watch out for the narcissistic personality?
No, not in that language. It was just be careful. They tell lies, or they'll ask you to do something, then they'll say they didn't, or they'll keep moving the goalposts. That kind of language was used. So you think it comes across as harmless enough, and that, oh, look at you, you'd recognize lies or the way they exaggerate stuff, and you go, oh, another story. But we didn't have language for it, and I suppose we didn't have people who came forward and named it and said abuse. They would just go, that's the way he is, instead of saying he's abusive or she's abusive.
Yeah, that's a really good example, because I actually use that phrase in the Gaslit Brain. I talk about a workplace where one of the vulnerabilities of our brains, as I think we've probably talked about before, is that they normalize things. When our brain sees something on repeat, it says to itself, oh, I've seen that before. That's not really worthy of my attention. It's not startling. It's not new. I don't have to think about it. That's just the way he is. He's always talking like that. He's always lying. He's always self-aggrandizing in a strange way. I'm just going to ignore it. I'm on autopilot when it comes to that guy. We don't register that this individual is dangerous at all. And we're not trained. Now, I'm impressed that I don't remember as a kid anyways, not that when I look back, I remember really having it taught from school and parents and just my parents' friends, that kind of whole culture. My grandparents, my grandfather was a principal of a school. My dad was a lawyer. My mom was an educator, and then she worked behind the scenes in politics, and a big believer in good governance. He really believed in the integrity of the people she worked with. So I grew up believing all of these systems. I believed in education. I believed in law. I believed in government. And I was never trained to identify the flaws or the manipulations or the bad characters that show up in all of those different professions. I was really naive, I think. So when I was in the workplace and came up against these kinds of behaviors, I had to completely re-educate.
And I was through, when you get to the stage of life, you're through a few workplaces, but never had I experienced the kind of insidious behavior. Like it was said to me before, you get a dictaphone, because he'll contradict everything he says, or he'll lie about this, he'll lie about that. And it was kind of a joke. But if somebody had actually said the word dangerous, manipulation, and used those words, then you would have actually went, wow, this isn't a place, this isn't healthy. This isn't even funny. Even though we laughed about stuff, it wasn't funny. People were getting sick.
No, going back to the language you used earlier, and I mean, just that is the perfect word right now. It's unhealthy, and actually it can make you sick. That's the key, right? It's the fact that our body has to tell us the truth of what's really happening is fascinating to me. Our brains are so wired by society that tells us, oh, don't make a big deal about it. Just laugh it off. It's not anything. Don't be so serious about it. It's just a joke. Those kinds of phrases, little do we know, they lead us down the garden path into a very toxic environment that actually can make us really sick. Like, we'd never walk into a room if we knew that our boss was carrying a virus. We would be totally prepared. We'd have a hazmat suit on. We'd have a mask on. We'd be prepared for it. But this shows up a lot in the gaslit brain, these situations at work where the individual is extremely educated, knowledgeable, sophisticated. It's been in the workplace for 20 plus years, has been a superstar at work. And even they do not recognize that they're walking into a room that's full of toxic fumes, and they don't protect themselves. So I want to tell you a story. It's a really interesting gaslighting story that happened in Canada. So won't use names, and it doesn't matter. Just imagine this. Imagine it as like a stage where there's actors on the stage. On the stage is our prime minister. Okay, our prime minister has this very public, honoring kind of close relationship with our attorney general. And our attorney general is this very powerful, articulate, amazing woman. And they're just such good, close colleagues. And they display it, right? The prime minister makes a point, all these photographs and videos and how much he honors her. Well, lo and behold, is the attorney general. She's put under a great deal of pressure to cover up a situation with a Canadian firm that's international. And they're doing all kinds of shady stuff, bribery and bad deals and really like criminal stuff. And the prime minister's office, so imagine the people that orbit around him. The prime minister's office is saying to her, pressuring her, you need to give them a big penalty, big financial fine, but we don't this in the courts. We don't want any criminal charges. We don't want any of that. We don't want it in the public. Keep it on the down low, make them pay their money, business as usual. That's how international finance and business works. And she's like, no, I can't do that. No, I'm the attorney general. I have to abide by the law. I'm a lawyer. I don't cover up for anybody, not even the prime minister's office. Well, lo and behold, the pressure was on, and they went out into the media and they slagged her in the media. So she said, well, that's not actually really how the meeting went. Click. Here is my dictaphone. Here is my recording of how the meeting actually went down. And this is the interesting part. The prime minister's office turned on her and said, how dare you do a recording without consent? How dare you record the meeting and stand up for yourself and ensure that the public didn't get the smear campaign on you that we were generating? You exposed us as liars. You exposed us as willing to throw you under the bus, our supposed close colleague. You are booted from the party. You can't be trusted. That's what they said about her. You can't be trusted because she exposed them as being liars. Now we're entering, Anita, into the world of gaslighting, where you're just like, wait a second. Who do I trust? What's real? What's a lie? What's like what? And you're talking about people in extremely prestigious, the most prestigious positions, leading a country, leading a nation, and they behave that way. It's amazing. So she got kicked out. And there's only one single colleague, a very interesting, strong woman who's a medical doctor and deeply admired in that government party. And she stood up and said, you know what? If she goes, I go. I'm not going to stay in a party like this. The key line for me that I love so much was she said, we can never be afraid of the truth. And so they lost two of these amazing individuals because they needed to maintain the cover up. They needed to switch the narrative to make it seem like They were the bad guys. They were the villains. They had to be removed, had to be scapegoated. They had to be driven out, which is a big threat to other people. Everyone else in the party's going, whoa, I better not tell the truth. I better not speak up. I better not question orders from the top. I better do as I'm told. And that, as you know, Anita, that's what workplaces do all the time. If you're the one that speaks up and you end up ultimately maybe being a whistleblower, you find that all your colleagues are like looking the other way, putting their eyes down on the ground. You do not want to be targeted. They're afraid.
Yeah. You see it time and again. And I was at a conference during the week, and again, there was a whistleblower came from the UK, and she had written a book it's on care homes in the UK, and how the book was called Stripped of Pride, and the abuse that goes on in care homes. And rather than make them better, they hid it. They don't like whistleblowers. And the most vulnerable people in society are older people, and they would rather hide it than address it.
It's all of these things. I mean, it's the same thing with schools where kids are so vulnerable, and rather than just address it and deal with it and say, okay, I made a mistake. I did something wrong. I was negligent. I didn't mean to be, or I was negligent because I was trying to protect the organization, whatever. This lack of accountability piece, this inability to take ownership when things go wrong, especially with vulnerable people, it's a pretty bitter pill to swallow. I don't have any tolerance for it. I saw that article about her in The Guardian, and I thought, what? I don't think I can read this today. I just can't take any more sadness or fighting against the machine. I just couldn't do it.
Yes. Eileen Chubb is her name. And she went on to talk about the behaviours of these workers with the clients. And they were brought for training. Now, imagine if that was abusers with babies, because babies are vulnerable, or preschool. Well, they're vulnerable. People are just vulnerable anyway. You don't have, it's ageism, I suppose, if you say at any age, but especially when they're babies or they're much older. And you wouldn't put it back. You wouldn't put an abuser back with a baby that's left him in a soiled nappy all day, crying in pain, or just totally afraid of you. And yet they're putting these people back with the older people.
I mean, going back to absolute lack of empathy, how can you leave someone in that state? And, it's a very important point you raise, because, lack of empathy is something that we all need to be working on in society. It's arguably the most important brain function that we have, is our ability to feel other people's pain, whether they're a baby or a preschooler or a very elderly person that can't care for themselves anymore. We have to find a way. I mean, you talk about going to training. Well, what do? Don't be cruel. These are the rules. You have to do this and that. That's not going to get to the heart of the matter. I mean, so if we take this all the way back to the narcissist, we're not told to be afraid of these people or to identify these people. That really, one of the red flags of an individual like this is how much they want your emotions. They love to get a rise out of you because they don't have emotions. And so they come across as, calm and cool and collected, and they don't seem to lose it. And then we put them in leadership positions. But the bottom line is, if you put a narcissist in a leadership position, you end up with a care home where empathy is not the top value of your hiring practices. It's not the top value of the education that you do. It's not the fundamental core of your work, right? Because if the narcissist doesn't feel anything, they're not going to care that their workers don't feel anything. They're not going to care that babies or elderly people are being hurt. They just don't care because they don't feel it. It's all of us who lose our cool, who have all these emotions, who don't come across as calm, cool, and collected, who will have a nervous breakdown when we see suffering. It's, and we're presented as weak or woke or whatever it is they want to say about us. But you know what? Bottom line is, you gotta, even though emotions are messy and hard to handle and they can be tiring, it's so much better to have them than to have zero.
Nothing. Yeah. If this conversation is hitting home, take a quick second to hit subscribe. It's free, it's easy, and it helps us keep bringing you stories that actually matter. And if you're listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube, go ahead and tap those 5 stars. It's the simplest way to help more people find this show and join the movement for healthier homes and more conscious workplaces. Your support doesn't just boost us, it amplifies every voice we feature. So hit subscribe, drop a rating, and let's shift the culture, one voice at a time. This is the FEMCAST. So Jen, can we go back to the narcissist and malignant self-love and how we make spaces safer, how we name it and get people to join us and say, stop normalizing this behaviour, please come with me, join us. We can't keep working in another 5 minutes, 5 months, 5 years, 5 decades of this. You know, if you're starting out or you're nearing the end of your working life, like even 5 more months of that is ruining people's health. And how we educate people, stop it now and normalize it and call it out and get people to come on board and say, yes, I know you're afraid, there is fear, but like the truth is the truth and let's do this.
You know, what's so interesting about that is what's complicated when you're dealing with a narcissistic or a psychopathic personality is, as we said before, they rise to the top. So they get into very top positions frequently, and then they create a whole workplace dynamic around them where other people, their response is to support the destructive behavior. That's very typical. Just we could take a quick glance at history and see that happening, right? We've seen it before. We know how it works. We know how it can actually become a whole nation. We can look at autocracies today. We could look at Russia, for example, and understand that, you know, what do you do when you put the narcissist or the psychopath at the top? So if we look at what goes on in Russia, what are your choices? I mean, you can speak up and then you get thrown out the window, right? We've seen that a slew of times, or you get poisoned, or you get put in prison, or you are detained for years and years and years and you're completely innocent. You are completely shut down and at risk. Your life and family are at risk if you give alternative media to the national mantra that's the controlled news of the leader, you know, these types of things. On the flip side, if you lick his boots and you become an oligarch, then you get tons and tons and tons of money. So you will fawn all over the narcissist. You will feed them everything that they need because you benefit from it. And we can see this in small workplaces where there's always the favorite or the favorites, and they get benefits. They get unearned positions. We can look at all kinds of different leadership styles. And if you don't do as the leader, the narcissist wants, then you're penalized, you're punished, you're driven out, you're demoted, you get fired. That's the buzzword of this era right now. You get fired. And, you know, they take your livelihood, they take your career, they take your hard-earned work that you do just away from you. They just snap their fingers and it's gone. So once we have people in these positions, whether it's in a family or whether it's in a workplace or all the way up in a nation, all of a sudden the community becomes mentally ill. The community starts to behave in ways that are corrupt, that are lacking in empathy, that are destructive. And, you know, look at the mess the world is in today. I mean, how many places can you point to, you know, maybe Finland, maybe Iceland, where things are working really well. And the leadership actually in those places is very advanced, very empathic, very rational, and not fueled by a narcissistic model. So long answer to how do we make safer spaces? We get educated. We educate kids right from the beginning. We educate people in the workplace. We educate voters not to vote for people that are liars. I mean, why would you vote for someone who's a pathological liar? No matter what they say, they're going to promise you the moon. They're going to promise you everything. Oh, I'll do this for you, this group. I'll do this for this group. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. But if they're a liar, why do you believe that it's true? Just can't get over that.
I never understand that either. Like, we have the same party here in Ireland. A decade of inept government, governance, empathy. It's like they hate the poor and they drive them into poverty, but they hate them. We have over 5,000 children living in homelessness, the worst it's ever been in the history of the state. And these people are in charge for 10 years. You know what? These people are allowed to do this. And it's the voters, I say, hold accountable. The media should talk about the voters. The media should talk about those people who go to those polling stations every time there's an election and vote the same nonsense in. Because it is nonsense. And it's hurting people, it's hurting society. We have children growing up in poverty, going to school in poverty, can't get out of that cycle. Their parents can't get out of the cycle. And then we have crime and we have prison, and all because of these voters who keep voting liars.
Well, it's just such a dysfunctional system. I mean, really, all we can do is hope that there's going to be a better system. And the system, the absolute deepest level of the system has to be empathy. And the thing is with empathy, affective empathy, is that you have to feel it for everyone. As soon as you create an out group, and that is your target group. So your target group is poverty, people in poverty, including their children. Really? Your target group is immigrants or refugees or migrants, people that are so desperate in their own country. They're not coming to your country because they're wrongdoers. They're coming to your country because they're desperate. I do not want to get into that. And I understand the complexity of it. I know that governments don't know what to do. They want to bring them in and care for them. On the flip side, if they can't care for their own people, that's not a good decision either. Like, I think to be in these governance positions is, if you care, it's arguably the hardest thing in the world. And I admire the people that do that kind of public service, who do it out of the goodness of their heart and wanting to create a better society. And it's easy to sit back for us to criticize them. But I agree with you. It's like there is a certain line you have to draw in the sand as a voter. And to vote in a repeat government that is ineffectual doesn't make any sense. To vote in someone who's a pathological liar does not make any sense. So yeah, how do we create safety? How do we start to get people to understand that you're in a lot more danger from a narcissist than you are from someone who is going to be physically violent? Like, if you look at the statistics of a physically violent person, like women are like, oh, I have to go to self-defense classes. And I get that. But I also think we should be going to mental self-defense classes.
Yes, I so believe in that, and that there should be, instead of the physical. Now we know there's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 domestic violence, but there's a lot more harm. Those numbers would be 4 out of 4 in some cases. It was just purely psychological.
But Anita, even if we take domestic violence, I bet you $1 million if we sat the survivors around a table and said, what was the first time your brain registered that this person who hasn't laid a finger on you is not safe? What's the first moment? And guaranteed, everyone around the table, or many of them around the table, would say, oh, it's when I bought such and such and he yelled at me for 45 minutes. Or we want to flip it around and say, it's, when she raised her hand right in my face as if she was going to strike me or strike my child. She didn't hit anybody, but she raised her hand and you could see the anger in her face. I should have known that. But, what's really interesting was the book, Malignant Self-Love, and the psychologist that wrote it, Sam Vaknin, looks at the relationship where there's certain people that he sees as almost addicted to the narcissistic personality. He calls them covert narcissists or inverted narcissists. And they crave this type of intense dynamic where they're always trying to change the person. They're always trying to save the person. They will submit to any type of heinous abuse from this person, including even allowing their children ultimately to be harmed by them. I don't mean it that way, because I know there's lots of domestic abuse situations where the person's desperate to get away, but they can't.
I totally believe in these mental workshops where we go, instead of doing all kinds of physical exercises and positions to protect ourselves, that we go in and we are brain safe from day one, whether that's in the workplace, in a university, in a relationship, just that we are brain safe. We recognize the behaviors, we call it out. We have the language for it now. I mean, the dictionary has caught up so much with culture and behaviors. We just need the law now to catch up in workplaces because they are way behind on this. Mental workshops for people to help them recognize the behaviors. Well, the Gaslit Brain is going to do that in a book. And the Bully Brain showed us how to heal after abuse. This is all about prevention. And we want those workshops, we want those spaces where people, every sex, every age goes in and is mentally prepared for life, just people, because where you have people and humans, you're going to have bad behavior.
Yeah. And you know, the key is, as you just expressed there, it's one of the biggest failures in changing this, one of the greatest failures in creating safe spaces on a mental brain level. So these things wouldn't happen over and over and over again. We've known for 100 years about the narcissistic personality. We've done nothing to change how we conduct ourselves around them, to the point where we're seeing a geopolitical crisis of epic levels that we haven't seen in a long time. We're seeing it play out right now because of failure in laws, because the laws make us believe that physical harm to someone is serious and mental harm to someone is irrelevant. That's the biggest problem. And, you know, these politicians, if they really wanted to make change, they would be legislating so that people understood in the workplace, people understood in personal relationships, that lying is against the law. Sorry, you cannot be the head of a nation and be lying to people over and over again. You cannot be a media site that has a license that is perpetually lying to people. You cannot be a social media platform that is full of disinformation and misinformation. It's against the law to lie. Now, of course, there's going to be gray areas. There's going to be legal complexity. There's going to be lies that are accidental or white lies or whatever. But so what? Let's build a whole legal justice system around that right now, especially since AI is coming. If we don't have any laws that protect us against truth and observable fact versus manipulation, gaslighting, and lying, we're in big trouble. And we're watching it in real time. So that issue with the laws is incredibly important. The fact that you are allowed to psychologically abuse someone until they commit suicide and you're not held accountable is mind-boggling. As you said, Anita, we have a massive amount of research on this. We know that all of these different behaviors can cause neurological scars on the brain. All we need to do is look on a brain scan, and you're not legislating that. So the whole community walks around going, oh, it's okay. It's normal to lie. That, you know, yes, he's the president, but I mean, that's just him. He just tells lies. We document it every single day. He's in the thousands now since they've been fact checking him. And our society walks around as if it's normal. He's still invited to major international meetings. He still is running the country. He still has access to nuclear codes. He still can unleash the military on his own people. And everybody's walking around as if this is normal. It's the most amazing example of how our brains will habituate to anything. We've seen it in history, and it should be scaring us. It should have people awake at night, where the direction we're going in.
Like 70, 80 years ago, we had this in history. And now it's come full circle. Despite all of the education, the knowledge we have, raising awareness, and we have science. Like, it must infuriate scientists who go to all this trouble of getting educated, going through the process, doing their research work, and it's real commitment to go through and follow through to get papers published, to get funding so you can do it. It's a real love for trying to make society better. And they bring this information, this work to legislators, and nothing's done about it.
I know.
What is the point of education and educating these brilliant people and these brilliant minds that want to drive a safer, more inclusive society? And when they bring their brilliant work, it's just dismissed.
You know, Anita, the one bright hope that we should remind everybody of is change is afoot. So in the United States, there's a group, End Workplace Abuse, that are working really hard to change laws to make psychological safety a right at work. So they are on the ground working double time to get the science, to get the knowledge, to make legislators create these laws that recognize 80 years later, we know a lot about how damaging this is and it has to be stopped. You're very unlikely to get punched in the face at work, but you are very likely to come up against a narcissist or a psychopath and have them ruin your career and ruin your work and harm you and harm your family. You and I have both been through it. And we're just regular people. We've been through it and many others have too.
Yeah.
So that gives me hope. I'm giving a presentation on October 31st to a group in Eastern Canada of lawyers. It's lawyers and they want to talk to me or they want to hear what I'm working on, because they know that psychological safety is on the horizon. It's going to be a legal change. It's only a matter of time. But the bottom line is it's got to come faster. The whole world, all voters need to be educated in narcissistic personalities, how they do not create psychological safety, how they create abuse cultures, and how these abuse cultures play out. It's textbook. They play out the same every single time. Whether it was 80 years ago or today, it's the same. Just change, the players, but it's the same play.
Do you think if we had, so say these people are coming up, it's election time, and we say, right, here's Jen Fraser, and the last time she was voted in, this is what she promised, this is what she did not deliver, and these are the untruths that she told along the way, or lies, call them what you want. And if we presented it to each person, the whole country that's about to vote, like the way Trump went in, I'm going to release the Epstein files. Now it's what Epstein files, and it was all like, oh, he's going to release them. So everyone fell for all of that. I'm not going to have war. Now he wants to go into Palestine and run it with Tony Blair, another warmonger. It's just beggars belief that people keep voting these people in. Do we? And I know we present and we laugh about stuff, but it's not hitting home. It's not hitting the heart.
The key word there is track record. The most important thing you can do with a narcissist, whether it's in the workplace or a personal relationship or a politician or a legislator, is you say, okay, this is them talking. This is what they're saying to me right here, right now. What does the track record show? Just as you said, Anita, you go back and you look at the lies, you look at what they failed to accomplish, you look at the promises, and you look at the damages that they did. You can do this in a personal capacity with a narcissist as well, and you'll see chaos. They will present themselves to you as, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm whatever. And it's very mesmerizing. They're very charismatic. We listen to them in the moment, but it's always the track record that you go to. And the other thing that's fascinating is the narcissist or psychopath, one of the first things they'll do with you is they'll erase your track record. They'll use all kinds of abusive techniques to take away the years and years and years that you have done what you've done. And people aren't trained to say, even in the workplace, just a second, you're saying I'm X, Y, and Z? Okay, let's look at my track record. Why am I suddenly behaving this way when for 20 years, I've never manifested any of those qualities? Do you think perhaps it's you projecting onto me? What's your evidence? The other key thing is, what is your evidence? The track record, evidence, education, science, all of these things must be crushed and destroyed. Any dissenting opinion, crushed and destroyed. Because the narcissist's narrative, their version of events, is all they care about. And it's always to consolidate their own power. And they will railroad anything that stands in their way.
We've moved from the narcissist. So if we move from the workplace and take them out of that environment where they're cruel, they do so much harm, they know they're doing harm. And like you say, if you could get inside their brain, you'd see it lights up when they see the harm they've done and the hurt they've caused. Because people who hurt, they show it. They can't mask it. They are hurt and it's visible. I've seen it myself firsthand. How do they leave that job, go home, and be a person? Like, we go home to our partners and we have normality and kind of a peace. Do they just stop there, or they go home and cause more chaos?
It's a great question, because it's something that perplexed me. I couldn't understand how they could turn the empathy on and off in their brain. It didn't make any sense to me because as a brain function, that doesn't make sense. You can't lots of times make your brain just do what you want it to do. It has its own automatic responses to things. And what I found was, and we've known this for a long time, again, we've known this for over 100 years, written famously in the strange tale of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is still a phrase used. If you're reading the media and it's talking about an abuser, they will use that exact expression, even though it goes all the way back to Robert Louis Stevenson's book over 100 years ago, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So if people don't know the story, it's a fascinating psychological story. It was just a novella written in Scotland, but it's had staying power because it's still true today. And it's exactly what you're talking about, Anita. So Dr. Jekyll is the respected doctor. He's like Dr. Larry Nassar. He's this respected doctor. And he goes home to his family, like Dr. Larry Nassar would go home to his family, and Jerry Sandusky would go home to his wife. And think of, Harvey Weinstein's married to this lovely woman with 3 children. So what we learn in these situations is the alter ego, the Mr. Hyde, and look at the language hidden, the hidden self, the alter ego, the destroyer, is kept behind the mask of sanity. And individuals like this, they like to use a position of power and credibility and social standing because it really gives them carte blanche to do terrible things. So again, look at how they rise up in politics. Look how they rise up to head up corporations. Look at how they run their own businesses and they call themselves CEO. And the next thing you know, they're running an abuse factory. We've seen it 1,000 times. They have no problem. They cloak themselves as if they are good people, when in actual fact, they just rip that mask off and destroy whoever they want. But they can put the costume back on very easily. They put the mask on very easily. And that's how they operate. They operate as a split personality. And you know what's so interesting? And I wrote about this in the Gaslit Brain. I was like, when do we first get kind of inkling that this is happening? It goes all the way back to Jesus in the Bible. Jesus in the Bible says, watch out for false prophets. Okay, that's really helpful when you think of some of the political people we're dealing with today. Watch out for the false prophet. And then he says, watch out for the wolf, the ravening wolf. That's a wolf that can't satiate itself. It is so hungry to eat. The ravening wolf that's in sheep's clothing.
We talk about this a lot. The jobs you can have where you need 0 qualifications for is CEO of your own business and a parent, where they can just go in and cause so much chaos and harm.
Yeah, and it's really tragic because guess what? A narcissist comes from abuse and neglect in the home. Almost guaranteed. Now, there's more complex things. There's genetics. There's this, there's that, whatever. There's more complex things. No doubt about it. There always is, especially with science. But almost always, they come from abuse and neglect. So they have a parent who's highly destructive. They're probably this fabulous kid full of potential, and they're raised in such a way that their empathy gets totally eroded, and they develop all these strategies to try and cope in the world because they don't know how to love. They never received it. They don't know authentic relationship. They never had it. They are survivors. And it's just, if our society could recognize that they're very ill and get them the help and care that they need, like we do with someone who has an addiction, we do so much to try and help a person with addiction. And especially if the family had, or they have resources to go and get the kind of treatment, the very sophisticated treatment they need to get better, they can get better. I swear, if we did the same thing with empathy erosion and we really try to bring back to life that inner child that's gone, or the inner child that's crying in the dark corner, we would live in a different world.
Do you think with the malignant self-love child, with a child that's, I know they say the crying in the corner or it's dead, that you can actually save them as an adult?
Well, Dr. Michael Merzimick is my mentor, and he is the father of neuroplasticity, and he spent 40 years in his lab proving and winning award after award after award. He proved that we actually have neuroplasticity. We can change our brains until the very last moment we're alive on the planet. So I see no reason now. Have I read a ton of studies of people having their empathy erosion reversed? No, I'm not seeing that. But because of Dr. Michael Merzenich's work, I believe it's absolutely possible. I just think as a society, and our scientists, and our doctors and psychiatrists, and our neuroscientists and neurobiologists, that should be one of our most intense focuses right now, is figuring out all of the strategies in order to rebuild back up that empathy. And, leaders in the field like Dr. Helen Rees at Harvard and Dr. Simon Baron-Cohen at Cambridge, they say there's nothing more important than training people in building and growing their empathy. That's the most important thing to teach. How many schools are teaching that right now? How many workplaces have that on the agenda every single day? Okay, everybody, let's do an empathy check. How's everybody feeling? And are you guys able to reflect one another's feelings? No. What's interfering with that? Oh, somebody is really, really stressed out. We all know that empathy goes out the window when that happens. It's okay. It'll come back online. Let's all give her some space. Like, why isn't that happening?
But Finland, it is Finland that does the empathy classes for children, which is incredible.
Yeah, all schools should be doing it. Yeah, Finland, Iceland, those places are famous for their, Denmark, famous for how they care for children. The Children's Tribunal in Denmark is a model for the world. How come all countries don't have that? How come they're not really informing legislators day in, day out on what the research shows about kids? Because if you have healthy children, if you don't leave them in states where they're abused and neglected or homeless, then you are going to have a much stronger, healthier, happier, more high-performing society. Why wouldn't we do that?
I don't get it either, why we don't educate and help them when they're younger. So we don't have all this harm later and prison time and, the stuff that we have to do to fix it instead of getting in front of it and preventing it. Like,
it's tragic.
Yeah, it is totally tragic that we don't, we know the science is there. If we do this now, then later on we won't be paying this. And a part of me would have said before, why do we have to help the narcissist and the abuser? But that's one person, but he can have many victims. And so it makes sense, I suppose, to start with them, because then we have less victims. The victims also need the help. But if we started with them, we would have less victims, less resources that we have to tap into to help people. And we'd have such a much healthier society if it was identified early in schools. We did it in the Bully Brain series. I think it was on episode 5 when we were doing the bullying in school, and how you can recognize earlier that this child is mentally ill and a bully by the first thing they do when they go into a playground is look around. They don't have joy. They don't feel they want to play. They just are looking for a target and looking for somebody to harm and hurt. And that if you can see that early and you can work with that person, then we don't have all the hurt later.
Exactly. I can remember very, very vividly being in grade 5, and I was having a terrible year at school in grade 5, just terrible. I got moved from one class to another because I was seen as such a problem child. And there was lots of stuff going on at home. And there was a new girl coming to the school. And I told everyone at school that my friends, anyone that would listen to me, I said, when she comes to school, don't talk to her. Don't talk to that new girl. So I was laying the groundwork for her to be bullied. And I was trying to manipulate the environment so that would happen. And I can still remember now as an old person looking back, I remember how I felt so threatened by her. I didn't even know her, never met her, but a new girl to me in my completely unstable, unhappy state was almost like too much to bear. I couldn't take on another threat. And so, you look at yourself behaving that way. Wouldn't it have been nice if a teacher had pulled me aside or a kid had reported to their parent? You know what she's saying? She's saying this. And instead of going, you're a bad child, we're going to punish you. We're going to suspend you and expel you. We're going to speak to your parents. You're going to get into even more trouble at school. You're already identified as a troublemaker. How is that going to help me? When really the kid needs, hey, there's this, school counselor and he wants to talk to you and he's really good at getting to the heart of the matter and helping you get the resources you need and maybe talking to your family. And that's what kids need. And we could nip a lot of this stuff in the bud at the very beginning by really caring for children and understanding that they don't have ways to, cope with their stress. They don't have the vocabulary. They don't have the experience. They don't have the knowledge. We adults are the ones that can help them. And so we have to start doing that. That's just such a positive change we could all do. And Anita, it goes back to what we've done from the very get-go with bullying brain, is we try to sidestep this perpetual moral position on these types of behaviors and look at them through a medical lens. What's going on in the brain that's making the person behave this way is a much healthier question, because then you go, how can I help them?
And especially children, I don't care what age they are, and some of them can be difficult, but all they want to do is belong, and they want to be loved and feel loved. And to think that they're going to grow up and be that, because I find that really sad. As much as I despise bullies and abusers, I find it really sad. We're all doing work on ourselves, and psychotherapist says, talk to that inner child, talk to that little girl. And it's great that you can go back and you can see her, and you can see like the joyful times, maybe the sad times, and you can talk to her. But they don't even have that capacity because somebody didn't spot it early on. And I think that's really sad. And it's truly sad that they will live out their life like that, and then never making a difference, only hurting people or doing anything meaningful.
I know. It's really, really sad. And, it makes a lot of sense that one of their qualities is they're addicted to other people's emotions. Well, of course they are. They don't have any. Like, how horrible is that? To be this blank. It is really tragic. But, on the upside, because we have all this knowledge, we can change. Why don't we change it?
Yeah. And just educate everybody on how we can make it society safer and better for everyone. And I always say this, safer. It's just safe. When you feel safe, everything feels so much better.
And it's the greatest thing for your health. That's as soon as your brain feels safe and your body feels safe, then you are able to tap into homeostasis. And homeostasis is where recovery, healing, connection, belonging, all these, and health, like real health. That's where it all happens.
That was another brilliant time. Wait to talk to you next week when we have more of the Gaslit Brain. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita. It was great to talk to you too.
Thanks for tuning in to the FEMCAST today. If you believe in these conversations and want to help us keep shining a light on gaslighting, psychological harm and accountability, hit subscribe right now. Your 5-star rating and review make a real difference. They help more people find this podcast, hear these vital stories, and join the movement to end the silence. Dr. Jen Fraser's groundbreaking new book, The Gaslit Brain, is out now. You'll find the link in our bio. Until next time, let's keep building safer, more accountable communities. Because together, we don't just talk about change, we spark it. I'm Anita White-Moran, and this is the FEMCAST. Today's episode was edited by me and produced by badgoose.ie.